Hello and welcome to episode 57 of Pushing Cardboard. It's August 21st, 2026 as I record this. I'm glad to have you with me wherever you're hearing this. There's not a full slate of news this time, as it's only been a couple weeks since last episode, but that said, this is a fairly big one. My first interview this episode is with Sam London, a designer who is about to have a wave of games hit the market. And then later, I talk with Wes Crawford, one half of the team behind the new publisher Wharf Rat Games. And the game dive is back, and we hit the East Front. On the docket is Stalingrad Roads from Nuts Publishing. It might just be a Goldilocks game with the right amount of rules crunch and a reasonable amount of time. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who supports the show as a Ko-Fi patron. Your support is very much appreciated. If anyone else out there would like to become a patron via Ko-Fi, it's just like Patreon. There's details in the show notes, the newsletter, and on the website. It helps pay for the podcast hosting, the web hosting, and the interview website. As well, I'm an affiliate of both Cube for Me and Noble Knight Games. If you're interested in using either of those fine businesses, take the link from my website and they will give me a small percentage for bringing you. And Cube for Me will even give you a discount. Use pushingcardboard.com/support. Okay, on with the show. We'll have some news, some new arrivals, and general historical gaming chatter, all the stuff you are used to, and then we'll get to the good stuff. News. As always, there are links to some of the things listed here in the newsletter, in the show notes, and on the website. Let's start with GMT, as there has already been another newsletter since last episode. As I mentioned last time, the push to get Commands and Colors Ancients and Napoleonics into constant stock continues. The two base games go to the printer in November and will ship in early 2027, so get your P500 order in now for the best price. There's also a notice on the passing of Jeff Horger. He was the designer of Maneuver and the very popular Thunder Alley, among others. He'll be missed. They've started a new feature in the newsletter called Series Focus. It's exactly what it sounds like, and this month's series is Great Battles of the American Civil War. There's a fair bit of info about upcoming volumes. The two that appear closest to the finish line are Wilderness and Battles for the Ozarks. There's a lot of info there. Use the link in the newsletter to check it out if you're an GB ACW fan. There's an interesting note from Ted Racer with respect to his I, Napoleon and Dark series. He says he's happy for any other designer to use his systems, but there's a few topics he's working on himself, so stay away from those. They include I, Elizabeth, I, George Washington, and I, FDR. There was also, I think, a Pacific game in the Dark series. But of more interest to me is neither of those series, but rather he also says he's finally working on something new for the Clash of Giants system, which has been dormant for years. This time it's going to be the Napoleonic era with an Austerlitz-Waterloo combination. I'll buy that right away for sure. Gene also mentions they have put the following games on sale because they're all overstocked and the discounts are pretty steep. 1814 Australia, A Time for Trumpets, Dominant Species, Fall of Saigon, Fighting Formations Battle for Kharkov, The Battle for Normandy Deluxe Edition, and Welcome to Centerville. The only other GMT news are the P500 editions, which I'll catch up with later. There's a bit of good news, bad news for Canadian fans of Flying Pig games. They've announced that they will now ship to Canada, but the bad news is the rates are fairly high. It always amazes me that I can get things shipped to me from France or Poland for the same or better price than getting things from the USA. Makes no sense, but that's the way it is. Live Cardboard 38 was great. I talked about it last time, but there was a bit of a change. I actually had two guests, both David Thompson and Denver Walker. They played a game of Rebels Against Rebellion live on the show. David, of course, is co-designer of the game, and Denver runs Flying Pig, so the game's publisher. There's lots of good questions. The game was close, and I didn't have to play a game and host the show at the same time, so I had a little bit easier time of it than the usual teaching plays. Check it out. I was a guest, along with YouTuber Ardwolf, on a live stream by the Armchair Dragoons. The topic was feeding the content beast. I think Artie and I both said we don't spend too much time trying to keep up with the constant demand for content, but check out the video anyway if you're interested in that sort of inside baseball. A few people have asked me about using Dropbox with Vassal to facilitate PBEM play, so I made a webpage explaining it along with an accompanying video. If it's of interest, check it out. Let me know if it helps or if it's missing anything. I'll try to update it if I can. And then finally, Cube for Me is celebrating its 5th anniversary with a sale. Use the link in the newsletter or any of my links really to get to the site, and then use the code 5 years, the numeral 5, all caps for years, all one word, and you'll get a 15% discount when you're at checkout. So great time to buy some new trays. New games coming. Sound of Drums has its first ACW title in the pipeline. It is Bull Run 1861, and other than it has a great cover, much like their Napoleonic games, I know nothing about it yet. The new games coming from GMT are interesting. There's a new Pacific volume for the Last 100 Yards series called The Forgotten Hell. It has the Americans at Guadalcanal and Australians at Papua New Guinea. And hard on the heels of Baltic Empires, which has been a bit of a hit with folks I talk to, designer Brian Asklev has a second game in what looks now to be a series. Quote, Enlightenment Empires is an approachable 2 to 5 player strategy game about conflicts between the states of Central and Eastern Europe during the Enlightenment era, unquote. Huh, wow. I really enjoyed my first play of Baltic Empires, and I loved Asklev's 1812 Napoleon's Fateful March, so this is going to be an instant buy for me. This episode is sponsored by Noble Knight Games. If there's an out-of-print game you're looking for, they're your best chance. If you're looking for used games to avoid the new and shrink price, they've got thousands. And if you're looking to sell games, they're your best choice as well. Check out the link in the show notes, the newsletter, the website. Use it to get to their store. That way they'll know I sent you. I'll get a little kickback. I'll spend it on games. I'll tell you about those games. And then you'll head back to buy more games. It's a virtuous circle. What's on the table? Well, other than more playing of Stalingrad Roads, I also had Fallschirmjäger from the Gamers and MMP on the table for a solo spin. This is a brand new reprint of a 1990s game from them, and there's been no effort to update it at all other than a little errata and cleanups like that. So all this means that it has the thing I really hate about Gamers products: crappy setup instructions. Oh, and also small fonts on half-inch counters. It boggles the mind that MMP still doesn't make setup cards, or at least full-page setup pages in the scenario books. But nope, it's just a long run-on column of hex numbers with unit IDs that match the tiny IDs on the counters that you can barely see. That said, there's good news here. I hear from a source, doesn't that sound like shaky journalism, that the reason they've kept the crappy setups for so long was that Dean Essig didn't like setup cards and thought they were a waste of money. So sadly, the company is no longer in his hands, but happily, the new honcho thinks setup cards are a good idea. So hope springs eternal. New games to the collection. I got a mix of things this time, starting with a couple of oldies, used games. I got a copy of the Franco-Prussian War, the SPI Flatback. This is a Jim Dunnigan design that I've never played. I'd like to try it out. And as well as the old Avalon Hill game Submarine from about, 1975 or 6. I've never played that as well, and they were $20 each. I couldn't resist. Then I got a couple from VUCA. These are review copies. So look to hear more from me on In Fours to Heaven, which is a huge game on the invasion of Poland, 1939. I've never seen a game this detailed on that topic. You have to see it to believe me. I mean, it's a huge box and it's packed with stuff, including a lot of stuff to try and help ease you into the system. It's going to be a very detailed system, but it has more than just the big campaign game. It also has multiple scenarios, smaller scenarios, things like that. So even if you're not interested in, or you didn't think you were interested in the Polish campaign, this game might change your mind. Although I'll say one caveat: it's going to have a fairly hefty price tag. As well, they sent me a copy of a game that they've yet to release. called Pacific Fleet: Rise and Fall of the Japanese Empire. This is a remake of a 1980s game from I think from Hobby Japan, maybe. Anyway, a Japanese designer, originally published in Japan, and it was republished maybe a decade and a half ago by a small company. I can't remember the name of the company, but now it's getting a deluxe redo in the way that that only VUCA can. Check out. I've got an unboxing of both of these games. The Pacific Fleet one, if you want to find out anything about that, have a look at the unboxing, and you'll see it's just a gorgeous gorgeous production all around, and as VUCA always is. And it's a grand strategic Pacific War game. But I'm interested in it because it's by a Japanese designer, and I think we've had tons of games by American designers on the Pacific War, but this will be the first one I see from a Japanese designer. And then finally, two other things from Bellica 3G. They have a new printing of one of their earlier games called Santa Cruz 1797. They're a small Spanish publisher that concentrates on shedding light on more obscure Spanish topics. Some that might even be obscure to Spanish students. Who knows? Anyway, if you're interested in that or hearing more about the company, if you missed my interview with Francisco Ronco, he is Bellica 3G. So check out the earlier episode and check him out. And then finally, I got my latest issue of Vevictus magazine. This is Vevictus 187, which appears to have a game on the Paris Commune of 1871. And this is also the issue where it has a bonus game. And this one's on Kharkov, 1943. So can't wait to crack that open and check it out. That one. The Kharkov extra game comes with English rules right in the package. The game on the Paris Commune, there will be a set of English rules published on the website within a couple weeks for sure. So that's all the new games. And of course, what will I be doing with these new games? Well, that's right. I'll be figuring out how to store them. Luckily, this episode is sponsored by Cube for Me. They have the best trays, the most versatile trays. Check out my website or newsletter for my link. Use it to order their trays, and they'll know I sent you. Not only that, you'll get 5% off your order. They're the best, bar none. pushingcardboard.com/support. Okay, here's the first of my interviews. I met Sam London a few years ago when many of the games we talk about in this interview were just sketches, and now they're on GMT's P500 list. Here's our chat. Hello, welcome to Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Lindenberg, and today, coming live from San Diego HISCON North in St. Paul, I'm with Sam London. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm good. I don't know why they still branded this as San Diego. Like, it feels like if this becomes a regular thing, that's going to be intensely confusing for a lot of people.
Yeah, San Diego North. Yeah.
It's like San Diego North. Okay, so like Carlsbad? It's like, no, it's the Twin Cities. Okay, go.
Yeah. Well, the first time they did it was San Diego East, really. It was in the Naval College out in, I don't know, Bethesda, Maryland or something like that. I don't know, something like that. Anyway.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's them. So regular listeners will have heard my interview with Sam a few years ago when we first met down in the real San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first time.
That's it. And at that point, it looked like Firefight Tactical was going to be the first game out the gate.
I think that might have been, I don't know if that was all we had to talk about, though.
I think we talked mostly about that, and you talked about a couple other things that were like a twinkle in your eye at that point. And since then, a couple of those games at least have hit the P500 pipelines.
Yep.
Let's just, where's Firefight Tactical in the process now? That's been P500 for sure.
So Firefight Tactical is... It's not a sore subject, but it does make me sad because it's Firefight Tactical just had a lot of shared resources with other games that GMT was developing, and so there were a number of things that came up that were higher priority, and I would lose a resource. And this was in part, so like probably the best of those resources is Terry Leeds. I love Terry. Terry actually reached out to me at SD HISCON a few years ago, and he said, I just want you to know I really want to do the art for Firefight Tactical. And I was like, yes, please. And I just couldn't imagine anybody else doing it. And so he did a mock-up of one of the counters, which if we had a camera, I'd show. But I just couldn't. It's part of the reason that actually, I was talking about this the other day. I wonder if people wonder why when I go to so many shows I don't bring Firefight Tactical. And the reason I don't is because more than any other game I have going, I can't stand to look at my prototype copy of Firefight Tactical now that I know what the game looks like.
Right.
And so very early on, Terry shows me the direction he wants to take the artwork, and I was floored. I was just, this is so cool. But he's Terry Leeds. And so every time something would come up where they needed, high quality art very rapidly. So big example would be redoing the board for the anniversary edition for Twilight Struggle. They would take Terry. Right. And so then I would have to wait for him to come back and all this stuff. And so now all that artwork is done. And I didn't even know I was sharing him, but I was sharing my layout artist. He's doing incredible work. But I didn't even know I was, until they told me, he's like, okay, now you got him full time. I'm like, well, great, I didn't know I didn't have him full time. Right. And so at this point, all that's left that needs to happen with Firefight Tactical is the layout art for the bot cards themselves and the rule book. We have the scenario cards done, we have the packs done.
Did Terry do the layout on the...
No, this is a different artist.
That's a graphic designer.
Yeah. Terry could do the work, but I mean, he's needed other places.
Yeah,
and
map boards are like legendary.
Yeah, and there's this artist by the name of Donald, is out of Scotland. I don't know if you ever met him, but he.
I haven't met him, but I know what you're talking about.
He did the terrain work, and that was great. We were done in like 2 months.
Right.
So it was at this point, it's really just the layouts. I'm like, I cannot get that in people's hands fast enough because I have other things I want to announce in that series. And I can't even announce them until it's on the boat.
That's great.
So
I should have thought there was, but I hadn't even thought of that.
We'll do a fast follow is the intent that pretty much as soon as it's on the boat, we'll announce the Eastern Front for Firefight Tactical.
And then we can, of course, see the Mediterranean, North Africa, like that. And somebody's going to say, you got to do Pacific, and that's all. That's fantastic. I hope it's successful enough that you just go, let's do all this. That would be fantastic.
I'm hoping so also. So, but I've been happy with the game state for a long time.
When I talked to you that first time, sort of like the third game I think of you talked about, well, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I think you talked a little bit about your what would become common sense. Mm-hmm. But in between then, like the next time I saw you, I think was maybe at GMT West, where you had Microverse out for the first time. And is that the next thing we're going to see from you?
Microverse is an interesting thing because GMT has, which I'm very grateful for, GMT has a lot of faith in the game apparently. And so whereas I've had to share resources for Firefight Tactical, it's been an embarrassment of riches with Microverse. And so Microverse has been on the fast track. And so at this point, probably the biggest bottleneck for Microverse coming out is me, which is the design itself is, if in truth, if somebody was like, shut up, we're taking the game, we're printing it tomorrow, I'd live. But I want to do a little bit more refinement on one of the bots that's going into the box, the first core box. And so then once because I mean, the artwork is basically done. I think that will probably be canned. I have all the species artwork done, the ship artwork's done, the planet artwork's done. At this point, it's just like layout stuff. And the artist who did, Kurt Miller, did all the planets and ships and everything, is also doing the layouts. And so I think we'll be done with that very soon.
It doesn't surprise me that it's on the fast track, because on the one hand, every time you demo it, people just go gaga for it. So it's a great game.
No, I'm very happy that it's received so well.
And then plus, GMT, primarily a war game publisher, but always trying to broaden that out. This is going to be one of those games like Space Empires or whatever that might find a wider audience. So it might be great for you and great for them at the same time.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that was the thing that they discovered with things like Space Empires and Away Team, was that there's significant overlap in their core base between wargamers and science fiction fans. And so that's how they thought that this would work in, and it's been very well received. So I'm quite happy with it. We'll see what its breakout potential is when it actually gets out there.
Right.
But
it accommodates all kinds of different player counts.
Well, the first core box will just go 1 to 4. The plan is to do a second core box that's all new content. which will be a fast follow, and then you can combine those to go 1 to 8 players.
Right.
Yeah.
So it can get, it's going to become a convention favorite.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I never thought of it as I was designing it, but early on when I started working with GMT on it, Jason Carr said that it felt to him like it was a more of a true 4X like cosmic encounter.
Right.
And I never made that connection. It was just an accident. But I think that is where a lot of people will, be happy with it. Is it's like, wow, there's so many different species and they're all weird and
everything's weird, but it's fairly quick to learn, and like people jump in quick, and I think it's going to be as soon as it comes out the door, I think it's going to be no surprise that it's going to sell really well. I've got huge faith in that game.
Your lips to God's ears. I'll be very pleased if that happens. Because I mean, like I said, I have enough content to put out for that game for probably do a expansion a year for 5 years. Like I have enough stuff to do.
And people who, and I'm not saying this disparagingly. People who are sci-fi fans, when they find an IP, for lack of a better word, that they like, they're just like, you can't feed them enough.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing. It's an interesting challenge. I've been working on that game for 10 years. I've written an incredible amount of lore for that game. And so the playbook that's going to be in the box has a general strategy guide in it, along with the usual stuff you would expect. But each of the species has its own feature page in the playbook that gives a lore dump on that species and then a specific strategy guide for how to play that species. And so it's the kind of thing where it's hard to write a story with 100 main characters in it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I'm not a writer. Maybe people just be like, oh, this is just dross, and they won't read it. But if they do have any interest in it, it's like, there are funny moments that happen. Like, that's just as an example, the test we were just playing this morning at the convention, we ended up having 2 players next to each other that are the Ob and the Hodol, and they're both religious zealots, but with different methods of going about their madness. And it was just, as soon as they realized they were both like, no, we're both trying to seek out the same things for different purposes, they just started butting heads like crazy.
Right.
And it was, I got to enjoy, and they got to enjoy, because the way that I teach the game at conventions, because there's so many species, if I was to say we're going to do a draft, which is the way you're supposed to in the rule book, it would take it would take an hour to get started with the number of options. And so there is that. So you wouldn't have all of them, but just for everybody to familiarize themselves with all of them. So what I do instead at a convention is I just say, give me a sci-fi trope, and I just hand them, the thing they describe, because there's enough species that I can do that. And so anyway, when they looked and they actually read the flavor text for, on the back of the card for who their species is, they had their moment of just like, oh wow, this really is exactly what I wanted, and so they were able to get in a character and everything.
Oh, that's
that was
fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's it's not exactly role play, but it's a thing like, this is what I like about sci-fi.
Yeah.
You're gonna find it in that box.
Yeah.
Right. Well, like I said, the first time we talked, at the end of our conversation, you said something about American Revolution themed game that was also dice based, I think, which is like fit in with Firefight Tactical, which is kind of a dice drafting placement game, right? But the American Revolution one at that time was just like you were working on it, but it wasn't like now you're bringing it around.
Yeah.
It's called Common Sense, and is it on P500?
It is. It's available for pre-order.
Right. So tell me about that game, because I haven't actually locked eyes on that one yet, other than a quick walk by.
You can come by it too. I'm going to be running another one. So Common Sense is a difficult one to describe. The Common Sense is, so I design a lot of games. Common Sense is the heaviest game I've designed so far. It is very asymmetrical, card-driven war game. The thesis that I was trying to address with that system was to view conflict in terms purely of each side's willingness to continue the conflict, but specifically in conflicts where what would cause demoralization is asymmetrical. And so I started with the American Revolution, because it was how I originally conceived of the system, but because the colonies have much more of a hearts and minds thing. They have the drive, they want self-determination, and they have this ridiculous idea that they might manage to defeat the most powerful empire in the world. Now, I think I said this. I did an interview for the Player's Aid recently, and I like what I wrote so much. I'm going to repeat it here, which was, I love the American Revolution because it's a David and Goliath story. At the same time, I am keenly aware that it's David versus Goliath, while Goliath is arm wrestling another giant and also solving a Rubik's Cube. Right. But it's still a David and Goliath story. But anyway, whereas the colonies are all about hearts and minds, the British, it's a purely economic question. It's whether or not they can justify to Parliament continuing the investment to try to maintain the colonies. And so because of that, and this is what the system does, you are ultimately attacking and preserving totally different things between players. And so the game itself, the mechanics are asymmetrical as well. But it's just the way that you approach it and what you're trying to do. The British are just trying to destroy colonial resolve. The map is just a means to do that. It's not so much about where it is. It's just they're trying to break them. The colonies, on the other hand, they want to retain control, like territory control, and simultaneously really just hold out until they can get the French invested in the conflict.
And the French aren't a player. The French just come on.
Yeah. So So the game is a card-driven game, and so it has this dynamic initiative system where both of you are playing into what are called clashes, and whoever has the highest initiative going into that on their played card resolves their card, the other player doesn't. And so these events that are on these cards can be very powerful, and they tie to these different things you're trying to do. So both have common actions, which are marching, battling, and recruiting. The way they resolve is different because it's an asymmetrical game, but they serve the same function, so they have the same name. But both decks, they both have a unique 36-card deck. Both decks have a special suit, and the special suit gives them very unique things they do. So the colonies can train militia in the Continental Army. Continental Army is obviously much better, but the other thing is the militia can't move. They're locked where you recruit them. But once it's Continental Army, you can actually maneuver. And the other thing is negotiate with the French. The French eventually, depending on how much you prioritize them, will enter the war. Once they do, the French are unbelievably powerful, both in terms of the quality of their forces and also if you have an army that consists of both continental pieces and French pieces, you can activate them with either action type. So you can activate them as general marching or with French actions. And so that's pretty much end game if you let the French get it. That was what happened. It was actually ridiculous. It is a sandbox game. It can tell very ahistorical stories. I'm referencing, I was just crediting for it, but I was referencing a video Liz Davidson did recently about the difference between accurate history and authentic history. Yeah. And this is very much an authentic depiction. Yeah. And so,
what I like.
Yeah. And so in the game we had yesterday, the French came in with such abandon and things, just some ridiculous naval battles happened to the point where there was only one squadron of British ships off the coast of Boston in the entire colonies. The French just wiped them out. The French plus John Paul Jones, because one of them had to go chase John Paul Jones around the aisles. But it was there's a lot going on there. But there's
all this must have to, if they must have to spend some resource of some kind to convince the French to come.
Right.
That's going to make them weaker in some other part of
It's effectively a wasted action. The only ways that you negotiate with the French are to either seize initiative, so if the British have a run of taking their turns and then the colonies manage to seize initiative, that impresses the French. Otherwise, they have to actually spend actions.
And spending an action is an action you can't do somewhere else.
Right.
Right, yeah.
But then there's the other thing is that high initiative value cards are very situational or weak in their resolution, whereas lower initiative cards, which are very high to win with, you have to really plan it out, are incredibly powerful and game breaking.
This is quite different than a lot of games where the high initiative is the big card.
Yeah.
So
you would use them to seize initiative and then try to play a run so that you can get your good card out. And so saying low cards are good, Benjamin Franklin is a 0 of the special suit, and if you get him in play for the next 3 years, all of your cards gain a French action in addition to their other actions.
Right.
And so it's very hard to get him in play. You usually only see, on the lower end of the spectrum, you'll usually see maybe 2 or 3 cards of those per player per game.
Right.
But they're what the flavor of the game is. And so we had a game and a test about a year ago where somebody managed to get Benjamin Franklin in a play in 1775. And as a result, the French full on entered the war in like the spring of 77. And it was just like boom, and it was like, oh geez. And it definitely made for a memorable game.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff like that in there.
It's a card-driven game. What's the map like?
It's the colonies. It's the colonies, and there's it's point to point.
Yeah.
And so everything is either spaces or fortified spaces, and then they're broken out into colonies, because that is one of the resolve loss conditions for the colonies. Is if they lose control of an entire colony, they'll lose resolve depending on which colony it is. So, for example, if they lose Newport, which is the sole representation of Rhode Island, they only lose 1 resolve. But if they lose New York, they lose 6. But you get it back if you ever retake the entire colony.
Right.
So the British, it's a low investment thing to take Newport. But then as soon as it's lost, the colonies get the resolve back. But if they manage to take New York, it's going to be very difficult for them to retake it.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's what's in P500 and GMT.
I will say one more thing about Common Sense before we move on, just because I'm trying to hype it up.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been the coolest about Common Sense is other designers want to do games in that system.
Right.
And so I can't announce all of them that I'm talking to about doing that, but I can say Ananda Gupta is going to do a French Revolution game in the system.
If I had to pair another designer to work on your system, he would be who I'd choose. I think the two of you have like similar minds.
He's, I don't think it goes both directions, but I can tell you that he is one of the best people to show stuff to, because it's like anything I show him, he'll just go like, I showed him a game yesterday, and he's just like, I'm like, I feel like something's kind of off here. He's like, this is what's wrong. And he doesn't tell me he doesn't necessarily know how to fix it, but he's so good at precisely recognizing this is where.
He's really incisive.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad. And French Revolution, fantastic.
Yeah,
great. So, what else are you working on that we haven't heard about?
What else can I talk about
Right.
that I can talk about?
Yeah. Well, you can talk if you have something that hasn't been picked up by that's just an idea that hasn't been you haven't signed with a publishing firm yet. You can tell us about that. I see you thinking about it.
No, I'm everything that I'm very fortunate that all the things that I am ready to show are taken, and then but I'm trying to think if there's anything downstream that I'm excited to work on.
Right.
Let's see, I don't know if I have anything I can
That's
talk.
all right, because you've got other irons in the fire. You've got other ideas that have already been
It's
designed and whatever.
there's stuff I can talk about. I have a train game that I'm very excited about that I think is going in good directions. That one is more accessible than, it's probably more like a microverse weight game.
Right.
And so the idea there, every time I try to elevator pitch that, I'm like, it's 18xx for people that are sick of Ticket to Ride and want something more complicated. But it's like, it is a stocks and rails game that you could learn in a few minutes.
So not as complicated as 18x.
It's not, but the decision space is light. The strategic complexity is extremely high, to the point where it's like the first map I'm doing for it is Midwest, and so I had a game I was playing with my wife. It goes from 2 to 5 players. I was playing a game of it with my wife, 2-player, and she was just running away with the game, and she was I think she thought I was just testing or something. I wasn't really trying. And then all of a sudden, I connected Detroit to Toronto, and I was able to ship something entirely across the board, and it just inverted the game state. And she realized I'd been working for that for 4 rounds, you know.
Right.
And so it has that kind of outplay capacity that it's. I think when I was very first started working on it, I was thinking like, okay, what would trained chess look like? And that's what I ended up landing on. But
And have you got that signed with somebody, or is that just something you're working on?
Yes, it's going somewhere.
Yeah, great. And you are now working with other publishers beyond GMT as well?
I'm talking to a few other publishers about other things.
Because you already got 3 games with GMT, and
I have more than 3 games.
Yeah, of course. And their pipeline, big as it is, only so much can fit through.
Yeah.
I mean, Volko Ruki, he can't get his games through there fast enough. He designs for other people as well, because it's the only way you're going to be able to get more than 1 game out a year. Yeah.
And so it's, I mean, I've absolutely adored working with GMT. It has nothing to do with like, oh yes, screw them, they're bottlenecks. It's just a logistics issue. And so, and then there's some games, like I have a game that I'm not really comfortable talking about at the moment, but there's a game that I have coming out that's entirely outside of the wargame hobby and wargame publishers. It's just, there's no way I could print something like that at GMT.
Right.
And so it's all about just kind of, like it would be lovely if I was so fortunate that I was to reach a point where I really felt like I was picking between publishers, like who would be best to print something. But at the moment, it's just publishers have specific markets, and I know what market I'm seeking for certain games. And,
absolutely. Yeah, even amongst some wargame publishers have a very specific sort of focus. Like, if don't go to MMP unless you got a hex encounter game for the most part. I mean, not 100% that, but just about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're caught up. I think. I think that looks like it's about all you can tell me.
There's so many things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's really not in a place where I'm ready to.
No, that's all good. I mean, I sort of feel like we're going to see Firefight Tactical and Microverse.
They should be pretty close to one another.
They're going to come out in kind of quick succession, and then everybody be still kind of having fun with those when Common Sense hits the world, and all of a sudden anybody who hasn't heard about Sam London is going to know all about Sam and London.
I'll say this because I'm very this one's mine, so I'll say whatever I want about the pending, of course, as I was just talking to Kevin Bertram about, like my goal with designing games is just for people to have fun. Like that sounds cheesy, but it's real. And so the thing is, if there's a lot of people that are very excited about something, I'm going to keep designing in that direction. And if it turns out something is very niche, it's probably going to get deprioritized by me. Right. But pending people being or Common Sense being received as well as I hope it is, my next game in that system will be a Vietnam game. And that one is going to be interesting because so the other designers I'm talking to about that system, I've talked to them about the directions they're trying to innovate and take the system, which I'm all for. But I said there's a couple things I'm reserving for myself.
Right.
One of them I'm not going to tease yet, but the other one is I wanted to show how the system works for multiplayer. And so the Vietnam War one is a 4-player team-based game, so not semi-co-op like Fire in the Lake. It's straight up teams.
Right.
And so that'll be the next thing I'm working on in that system.
That'll be kind of wild to see the same system work for American Revolution in Vietnam.
Coin did it.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's always like, oh, look at that.
There's so much. The thing with the system, and the reason I think that other designers are so tickled by it, is because there's a lot of hooks to put lightweight chrome on that tremendously differentiate factions. And so in the case of like your ARVN NVA, your Viet Cong and your US, there's a lot of space to put fun things on there that are like, they feel so different. Like they feel so freaking different, but you're all playing the same game, but now you have this added bit, which I really like, which is, so the way it works, briefly, for multiplayer is that if your partner wins the clash by paying the highest initiative card, they get their full card, you only get your actions, you don't get your event. And so you still have that, like, okay, I'm kind of probably taking a knee this turn so that they can get this across. Right. But then Yeah,
Are the partners allowed to discuss their
open table.
open table?
Yeah, and so it really is. The biggest challenge for that was that I think that history generally has taken a very unflattering view of the Arvin, which I think is entirely fair from an organizational level, but not fair from a boots on the ground level.
Yeah, the results.
And so that's something that has been a challenge in the right way I wanted to depict it. Is I don't want it to have the feeling of okay, who's playing the Arvin.
Right.
And so anyway, but I'm very excited for that one, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to start showing that one at conventions at the tail end of this year.
Card-based games can be such a great way to get in little bits of Chrome when they're just on the card. It's just like it's not in the rule book. It's just there. It's like you don't have to learn anything.
So the thing is, and this is part of my thesis with Common Sense, Benedict Arnold is in both decks in Common Sense, and in the American deck he is over-tuned. He is way too strong, and very intentionally. And in the British deck he's okay at best. He's really not good, also intentionally. But the whole thing is, if the British player ever plays their Benedict Arnold card, it flips this tracker on the map, and now the American Benedict Arnold is blank for the rest of the game.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's again, it's something that was something important to me that I wanted to have represented in the game, and it's represented by 2 cards and a counter that it doesn't even. The only mention of in the rule book is when during setup put this counter there, and. Yeah, so there's so much opportunity there to do stuff like that.
And a little bit of history too. Most people they think of Benedict Arnold, they think of the traitor, but they don't have any sort of thought about actually he was
incredible.
He was an incredible general, and they lost a good one when they didn't keep him happy.
It was funny in the game of it we had yesterday, and this is totally unscripted, just worked out this way. One of the players managed to get loyal Benedict Arnold into play, and read the card and was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so then he is immediately like, this is what we're doing. And he marched from, so this is slightly different, but he marched from Pennsylvania into Canada to try to take Canada with Benedict Arnold. And then his army just got wiped. And I was just like, history, man.
Yeah.
We did it.
Exactly.
It happened in the wrong year, but it happened.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks for catching up with me, Sam. I'm glad to run into you. Hopefully, I'll run into you in California again. And knock on wood. I hope the next time I see you, we'll have one of your games actually on the table in a production copy.
I really hope so. Okay. That would be fantastic. Thanks a lot, Graham.
You bet.
Yeah.
It was great catching up with Sam. And it's a bit scary to guess at how many different game ideas Sam has on the go at once. He may well turn out to be the next Herman Luttman with games coming out from 6 different publishers every year. On to our game dive. Stalingrad Roads. This one has been a long time coming. Nuts sent me a copy of this game. Thank you very much, Nuts. Over a year ago, and I was in the middle of playing it and writing about it last summer when I had my basement flood, which many of you will remember. The game pretty much survived the water, but then it was packed up for months while the basement was renovated, and I only recently got it back out. So, finally, here we are. This is the 3rd game by designer Nicholas Rydant of his Roads series. First, there was Liberty Roads, which covers the campaign to repatriate France from D-Day to March 45. And then there was Victory Roads, which covered roughly the same period on the East Front from June 2nd to the fall of Berlin. I've played neither of these, but they're generally well-loved games in the hobby. Stalingrad Roads, however, is not quite at the same scale as the first 2. The units are still divisions, and the map scale is still 25 kilometers to a hex, but the time scale has shifted from 2-week turns to 1-week turns. So a little more granular in terms of time. I can't compare the components to the previous games. Looking at images online, the new counters are a little less colorful, but perhaps easier to read. The map is less colorful as well, but that reflects the season. All of Stalingrad Roads takes place in winter, of course. It's a very clear map with several tracks along the edges. It's a real pleasure to play on. The counters are half-inch, which will turn away some players, but the key text on them is big enough to make them easy to read at a distance. The only time it gets tricky is the few times in a game where a unit is upgraded and you have to search for a specific counter. The unit IDs are not in the same large font as the strength points. There are 4 small to medium-sized scenarios and then the larger campaign game. That said, Nut claims the campaign game can be played in 5 hours by experienced players. I don't know. That might be true. My plays were cut up across sessions, so it was hard to get a real gauge, but it in no way felt like a long slog. This is in some ways an old school I go, you go hex and counter war game. I say in some ways as it has many tweaks that make it its own thing. Most of these may have appeared in the first 2 games as well, but on top of the basics, there's plenty of chromey rules for the specific Stalingrad situation. Units are rated for attack, defense, and movement, standard stuff, though what struck my eye is the movement. Generally, infantry divisions have 2 movement points and armored units have 3. There is some exploitation movement and combat in the game, and the armor, I guess, gets a bit more movement there, but you're not moving very far each turn other than when you use strategic or rail movement. Terrain is pretty standard and aligned with the movement allowances. Clear and urban terrain costs 1 movement point. Woods and rough cost 2. Roads and rail cost 0.5 point. Plus the usual extra for crossing rivers and things like that. A unit can always move 1 hex regardless of the cost as long as it's into acceptable terrain. This being Russia in winter, of course, weather plays a big role. Given the time frame, November to March, the main weather is either mud or snow, the latter being preferable if you want to make any progress. Mud slows things down and takes the edges off combat. Ironically, the Germans will be hoping for mud more often than the Soviets in this particular game. There are also degrees of cloud cover, which affects air operations, both offensive and supply for Stalingrad itself. And then finally, the rivers. They start unfrozen, then the minor rivers freeze, making them more like open terrain, and then the major rivers freeze, making them more like minor rivers. Suddenly, it's much easier to move across the board because you can get across the many rivers that cross the map. It's worth remembering, though, that combat across a river is unchanged, and so they still make great defensive positions. Or they would be if you could defend all along them. A big feature of the game is there are no zones of control. Well, there are for tracing supply, but that's it, not for movement. No zocs for movement, so you can move right past an enemy. And of course, with only 2 or 3 movement points, you're not going far, but still. Combat is odds-based, but it has a tweak as well. You determine the correct column, roll the dice, and you'll be given 3 results. The first is the losses for either or both sides, A1, D2, things like that. Tells you how many steps to lose. And then there's a tactics column for both the attacker and the defender. The attacker may get to place an exploitation marker or 2, setting it up for later, or it might cause an extra step loss to the defender. Or on a bad roll, the attacker may have to retreat themselves. The defender may be made to retreat or given the option to retreat or take a loss. Or they might be able to regroup a bit and shuffle a unit behind the attack point. Kind of cool, this triple column thing. One thing about this game that will split players is the amount of chrome and the number of little subsystems. Once they're in hand, they're great, but they will keep you looking in the rulebook for quite a while. Case in point is even more nuance to the combat. If either side has armored units or elite units involved in combat, they may declare an armored combat, an elite combat, or both. The armored attack will allow for more units to exploit if you get an exploitation result, but if you suffer a loss, the first loss must come from an armored unit. The elite bonus lets you choose a bit from the tactical results. You don't have to take the exact one you roll on, but the similar downside is that any loss must first come from an elite unit. That's all fairly straightforward, but then things go even a little farther into the weeds, and I have to admit I had a little trouble remembering the next level. There are rules for German superiority, which I won't detail them all here, but they only come into play in very specific situations, mostly when it's all German units involved. Conversely, there are rules for Soviet major successes. This was a turning point on the Eastern Front. The Soviets went from feeling like the Germans were unstoppable to feeling like aggressors. So there's rules here that define a major Soviet success, and then each time they're triggered, they negate one of those German superiority rules for the rest of the game. It is interesting Chrome, to be sure, but I'm sure I missed their implementation almost as often as I remembered as I was going along. The scale of the game is such that Stalingrad itself is only 2 hexes. As with many other games that focus that have this famous city in the title, the game, of course, isn't just about the battle to take the city or even to relieve the city, though that's part of it. The map stretches from Stalingrad in the east to west of Kharkov in the south. We have the major cities of Mariupol, Kharkov, Stalina, Rostov, Poltava, Zaporozhye, as well as a handful of lesser cities and airfields. Each of these is a victory point location, originally in the hands of the Axis, that the Soviets will have to recapture to win. Of course, there's a couple of sudden death victory conditions as well, both hinging on either an early capture of Stalingrad by the Russians or the Germans maintaining a supply line to Stalingrad past December. Failing either of those, it's the VPs that we count up to see who's going to win. Okay, so far, other than a couple wrinkles in the combat system and the lack of zones and control, we've got a fairly standard hex and counter war game. What sets Stalingrad Roads apart is all its added chrome. One of the biggest parts of this game is a whole sub-game having to do with Stalingrad itself. As I mentioned, it's just 2 hexes on the map. The Germans occupy them and control the 5 or so hexes just behind them, stretching back to the Don River. The Russians are on the banks of the Volga, right up against the east side of Stalingrad, and then there's a line of fortified hexes running west from the north of the city to the Don. A mix of German, Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units man a line all along the Don, which runs northwest from the city all the way up to the far corner of the map. So the battle is going to be divided into 2 large sections. The Russians will fight all along the Don, breach the river, and then push south and west to grab back all those cities. But then there's a sort of separate battle for Stalingrad and the hexes just north of it. At some point, the Soviets are going to surround Stalingrad and cut off its supply. That might just be the city itself, but it's more likely it's going to be the city and include a few of those hexes to the west as well. Once this happens, the Axis player can declare the area as Fortress Stalingrad, and this has myriad effects. The German units in the pocket are no longer under standard out-of-supply rules, but subject to a broader set of fortress supply rules. It's a much more granular range than regular out-of-supply, this time having 11 levels to it, with the key part being that the unit's defense factor degrades much more slowly than their attack factor inside the fortress. As well, of course, retreat results are almost completely ignored. There's rules for supplying the pocket via air and a whole bunch of random events related to that air bridge. Eventually, the supply level will probably reach 0 and the city defenders will finally surrender. So then the focus, of course, becomes all about the wider situation. But the fortress pocket has implications for the Soviets as well. Every movement phase, the Soviet player checks every hex containing Soviet units that are adjacent to Axis units in the pocket. The wide majority of these Soviet units will be frozen in place under a rule about securing the pocket. As well, as long as the German controls the 2 city hexes as part of the pocket, the Soviets have to keep 24 divisions or corps within 4 hexes of the pocket. So this is a lot of troops that the Soviet player would like to release to put towards the fight for the other cities. So the sooner they can eliminate the Stalingrad pocket, of course, the better. Another thing that's noticeable in this game is the severity of the supply rules. Each side has several headquarters units, and each HQ has a supply radius of between 6 to 9 hexes. If the headquarters unit is in supply, then any units within that radius are in supply as well. Fair enough. Any unit out of supply has their attack, defense, and movement halved, and any movement they do must bring them closer to a friendly headquarters. It can be very painful to try and make it back into supply, and when you lose a headquarters, you're likely to be putting a lot of units out of supply. Support markers are a big innovation in the series. Both sides have a cup full of random support chips, and depending on a variety of factors, they're going to draw a few new ones every turn. These give you mostly benefits for your own side, but a few are nasty surprises you can play on your opponent. For example, all the Soviet artillery supports come via these chits, as do the German 88s for defense. The Soviets can bump up their support marker acquisition by declaring offensives. A single small offensive brings a modest amount of supports, but they can have 2 of these small offensives concurrently, The caveat is that most of the supports will have to be spent within a few hexes of where they place the offensive markers on the map. However, if they save up, they can launch a major offensive, which gets 10 supports and can really make hay. With markers for artillery, Katyusha rockets, local surprise attacks, extra exploitations, they're gonna make some progress. And that's not the end of the Chrome and the subsystems. Another one of these is the Führer approval track. For the Axis, keeping Hitler happy means you'll get more in the replacements phase when both sides can flip a few degraded units back to full strength or bring back eliminated units. The tricky part is the things that make the Führer happy are very difficult. Holding out in the pocket helps, of course, as does winning big battles, as in eliminating at least 3 steps of Soviet units at a time, which is a very difficult feat. Losing parts of the Stalingrad pocket and losing major cities in the wider map will lower Hitler's approval of you. Mitigating this a bit, there's also a Manstein marker on the track. If the Führer marker falls below the Manstein marker, you use the values on the higher one instead, whichever one is higher. Manstein gives the Axis player 2 chances to launch offenses and fight back a bit. Launching either of these or both will give the Axis player a few extra supports. Well, it's really not so much extra supports as actually getting to choose the supports rather than draw them out of a cup. First, there's something called Wintergewitter, and then later the famous backhand blow. Of course, you have to have a few things in place in order to launch either of these, but they are a good way of both hurting the Soviets and also raising the Manstein and Führer markers. There's some real fun here, but it's a bit fiddly, and another chunk of the rules to keep track of. Both sides receive reinforcements all game long, both in the form of units and supports. There's a special set of rules for Soviets receiving their reinforcements, of course, another little twist. Unlike the Axis, they don't receive them directly, but they first go to something called the Stavka box, and then they're released slowly from there. They'll get more if they have headquarter units situated in major cities and on railroads, less if the HQs are just out in the wilderness or just on a road somewhere. In conjunction with this, there are rules about Soviet momentum. Whenever the Soviet moves a headquarters unit, they're going to suffer a penalty of 1 shortage marker going into their supports cup. These have the possibility of really drying up some Soviet supports for a turn. In total, it is a lot of little subsystems on top of a fairly straightforward game. I'm sure, for most of us, they'll become second nature after a while, but I certainly have missed a thing or two here and there. Even on a third playing, I was still looking up a few of those superiority rules. But that said, it's this Chrome that gives the game a lot of its juice. Definitely worth the squeeze for me. The game isn't without a few disappointments. Despite being a fairly procedural game with a separate and slightly different sequence of play for both sides, there's not a player aid with those sequences of play to be found. If you need reminding what the next step in the sequence is, you have to look in the rule book, which is pretty weird because another thing that drives me a bit batty playing this game is the number of player aids. I count 13. The box says 14. Maybe I've lost one. I find I'm always pawing through the pile to find the one that I need. A couple of setup sheets, a couple are setup sheets, but on the reverse side, they still have a player aid, so you kind of need them all. When a game has so many aid sheets, I think it's probably better to bind them into a small booklet, and then at least you have the possibility of remembering which one is on which page. Another quibble that may set me at odds with some of the players who are real sticklers for detail. This one is, here, in the campaign game, apart from guards infantry units and armored units in the HQs, the Soviet player has 60 infantry divisions to set up, and they're going to get many more as the game progresses. I'm sure it reflects well on painstaking research, but each of these infantry divisions is identified by its division number, and you're asked to set them up in certain hexes, even though all 60 divisions have exactly the same ratings. This is a real nightmare for storage and for setup. It would be so much easier to just not number them, but have them just be generic and set them out without having to find the right one for each hex. Sure, some of the specific ones will be upgraded as the game goes along, and if they don't have their unit numbers on them, you're going to need a little abstraction. but I think it'd be well worth it for the savings in storage and setup headaches. These are quibbles, though. They don't detract from the gameplay at all. This is a really great system. I think it's and I think probably out of the 3 games in the system out so far, I think this is probably the right volume for me. Or I think the previous 2 Roads games are a bit bigger, take a little longer. This one's just right. It's something you can play in a day and not a long day at that. So anyway, thanks Nuts Publishing for sending me a copy to check out. I'm sorry it took so long to do this. My plumber had their own agenda as to when I was going to have access to my games. All right, let's get to the second interview. Wes Crawford has been playing and designing games for years, along with his partner Ryan Heilman. He's taken the next step and is now a publisher under the moniker Wharf Rat Games. Here's our conversation. Hello, welcome to Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Lindenberg, and I'm delighted to be talking to Wes Crawford today. How are you doing, Wes?
Doing great. Loving it here at SD HistCon North.
Yeah, this has been a great convention so far. It's I've never been to Minnesota before, so I didn't know what to expect, but this location they've given us, I can't believe what a palatial building we're in.
I know, and it's right in the heart of the city, which is not overly bustling, but things are going on down here. It's really nice.
Not too bustling is good. And, if I look out the window, I can see the Mississippi River. That's like, I think that's what that river is.
Yes,
we're near the top end of it, right? So I'm talking to you today because you're part of a new company, a new publisher called Wharf Rat Games.
Yes.
You and
Wharf Rat.
Right.
You say it real fast, it sounds like Wharf Rat.
That's right. No, Wharf Rat. Yeah.
And what's even worse is Ryan found a company on the internet called What Fart. When you look at it too closely or too quickly, it looks a little bit like ours, but we'll try to stay away from it.
Yeah. Well, and that's your partner, right? Ryan Heilman?
Ryan Heilman.
Yeah.
He's back in Baltimore. He couldn't make it on this trip.
And what was your connection with Ryan? How did you two come together to start this?
Well, I guess if you really want to go back to how I first met him, is we have a really great game store back in our area. Well, there's a lot of really good game stores back in the D.C., Baltimore area. And I wrote a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, that I went to an estate sale, I guess the game store had done, and they had a lot of 1,000 old war games. I said, let me go check that out. That sounds interesting. I came back and wrote about it on Facebook, and I got a private message from him. He said, I could do better prices. And evidently then I found out he buys and sells games. I mean, he was, sort of saying it kidding.
Yeah.
But so we got to know each other through that. Some of the games I now have signed with Compass Games, like one Engine Thieves came out by Compass, but another one on the Confederate raid on St. Albans, Vermont, which if you don't know anything about that, go look it up real quick.
Right.
It's a really fascinating story. I had him do prototypes for it because I was naive, and I said, wow, I really want a nice prototype. I can put it on my shelf, get Game Crafter to print it. And that was going to be all my aspirations were. And he did this great job on the prototypes and stuff. And so then I started going to conventions and started getting some of my games, licensed by different companies. And but I never had to go really in prototype as nice as I had and pay the money for it. But that's how we started. That's how we met. So he started working for me to prototype. And then it went on from that. He got me involved in a few things with another company he was working for. And from there, one day he said, I really want to start my own company and do things the way I think they ought to be done. And by then I had absolutely trust in him about how he does things. And he asked me, would you like to be a partner? And I said, I would love to be a partner.
Right.
And I still consider him the major partner of the two of us because he knows so much more about the business and graphic arts and all this kind of stuff that I do.
The first thing that you guys got together with those prototypes, it's amazing the quality of prototypes you see when people are showing off their wares at game conventions now. It's like, I'd actually buy that. That looks fantastic. 25 years ago, it was like cardboard with some crayons and, like...
That would still be me.
Yeah, me too.
Now,
Me too.
right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
if it was all up to me to do it. Luckily, he's now giving me a few templates that I can type in and make cards.
Right.
And, and different things like that so I can do something on my own.
But you were designing games before you like you guys started Wharf Rat, and you were placing them with Compass and other places like that.
That's because I met them. Joe Fernandez made the first introduction with them, the designer. But when you say I was designing, yes and no. I did a lot in middle school and high school. I made a lot of games using the systems that were out by and SPI at the time, and even into college. And if somebody gave me some assignment and had to be on something I really didn't care about, I would try to turn it into a game.
Right.
And so that was super fulfilling to me. I remember doing a game on the whole European theater of operations in World War II, and it was 6 poster boards, took up the whole ping pong table. It was so fun. I mean, I'd worked a year on that,
right.
And thought a year was a long time. Ha ha ha. And so anyway, then I went on the road. I played music professionally, and still do. And went on the road for years. I did not do anything really with gaming or designing from probably 82 to 2018. Although I dabbled a little with a collectible card game kind of idea in the 90s. It didn't go anywhere. And so I just really focused on music. So I didn't come back to this until 2018. And, then I started meeting people like Ryan and stuff. And when I started going to conventions, which was, first convention was PresCon, and that was, when was that? 4 years ago, and 4.5 years ago? And started meeting people and showing them my ideas, and it started clicking a little bit.
Right.
So I did start getting a few other games signed. I have a total of 6 signed with a number of different companies. And then when Ryan, not even 2 years ago, said, let's put Wharf Rat together, we started doing that. And that's been a lot of fun. And I think the first offering, A Forlorn Hope, is by Herman Luttman.
Herman, yeah, you kind of picked a superstar to kick off the company with.
We're very lucky because Ryan has developed and co-designed with Herman.
Right.
And so we had that connection. And we interviewed him for our first Wharf Rat show, which was, said, oh, wow, let's get him to be on it and interview him. And he started talking about his history and all this kind of stuff. And he was talking about when he first designed, In Magnificent Style, and originally with Victory Point Games, and he pitched the idea as a World War I trench warfare game. That was the first original idea. And they said, nobody cares about World War I. It hadn't even been the centennial yet for it. And he changed it over to Civil War and specifically Pickett's Charge. And so we said, oh my God, what a fascinating story, Herman. Would you like to go ahead and design that game you originally wanted to do 15 years ago or whatever it was? And wow, you've been designing that many more years. It's, you got even more ideas.
Yeah, of course.
Said, so that was like, fantastic for us.
Yeah, and you feel, it sort of feels, if you have Herman as your first designer, you're kicking things off on a high note, and there's not a lot of chance that it's not going to be a good game. Like, he just is putting out banger after banger after banger, both his big two-player games, but also his solo games. Like, everything he does is just like right on the money these days.
Exactly, and it's a tried and true system, but taken in a different direction, and we have 7 scenarios. On this one, we actually have terrain tiles, which greatly affect the play of the game. And I really he said, I'm going to do the Lost Battalion scenario. I'm thinking, how is he going to do that with that system? He did it. It's like my favorite scenario in the game now. You have to fight through Germans, through the forests, to get to the Americans to save them before they're destroyed.
Right.
And things are happening that can harm them during the game, too. So it's really a race, too.
And there's so much more interest in World War I now than there would have been when he originally pitched the game to Victory Point Games.
I think you're right.
Because I mean, just this morning I played a World War I game, and we could probably see 3 or 4 more out on the tables out in the hall right now if we had a look. I think there's a lot of interest in that topic, and the fact that it's a solo game. I mean, there's just a huge desire for solo games from so many gamers.
Exactly.
I like to play face to face, but not everybody has somebody to play a game with, or their schedule doesn't match up with everybody else's. All that kind of stuff. So
we'll find ourselves in that position. And it is a solo game, but 2 and 3 people can play it too.
Cooperative?
You assign the different battalions
right.
To different people, and you do have to cooperate in a number of ways and talk and discuss about it, but you still got to get your own battalion going, and
right.
It's up to you. So it's pretty fun too. All the conventions, it seems like they just assign us so many players, because even if we tell them how many players we want to do it, well, we want to show it off more than just to one.
Yeah, anyway. Of course, yeah.
And then, so it's always been multiplayer at the conventions, but I'll bet it'll be 90% played by the audience
solo.
Who buys it.
Right, yeah. How far along is it in terms of its production? Is it ready to go, ready to, is it play tested to death?
Yeah. All that's been done, and I'm really happy with how the play testing has come out, the rules, been edited and re-edited. We give it to other people that are really good at that, and I think it's polished. We've just had a really unfortunate time with the artist situation. We had a great artist, a young woman named Tawa, and she did the art. We went with a black and white kind of comic gloss.
Yeah, it looked great. I saw the early stuff.
Distinctive and interesting and bleak. There's a bleakness about it that we wanted to convey.
Yeah.
And then she had medical problems, I think a tendonitis or something, and had to stop doing that. So she finished out the art, but we had to get somebody else for the graphic artist, and she just had a close death in the family.
Oh, that's right.
So she's had to pull out. And so we have everything ready but the rule book.
Oh,
Basically, that's where we are.
Yeah. But this is a key piece.
Right now, we're contacting people, say, if you can start tomorrow on the rule book, you're hired.
Right. Yeah.
And Ryan has gotten it all. We've got the Word document and all the graphics and where they need to go.
Just needs to be laid out for printing.
Just want it to look nice and be as much quality as what we have.
Right. So once you have that, will it go offshore for printing and then come back? And
yes. Where it is they have all the cards, just about everything, all the files. The factory in China is looking through them to make sure they're exactly what they need and there's no questions. They've been really good about asking us questions too, not just, some companies will just do what they're asked to do and not question it. And, I think you really want, in this kind of field, a company that will care enough that will look into it and make sure. Are you sure this is what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They might see an obvious mistake. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so they have all that, and they're working through that. So then when we get them the last components, which is actually the graphic artist is going to finish the back cover, and then we get the rule book to them, then we'll get a hard copy.
Right, to test, demo, yeah.
And we have plans to meet Herman, even though we live 8 hours apart. We're going to meet halfway,
right,
and spend a day or two going over it with a fine-tooth comb, playing it, setting everything up, and all that with him. And I don't think a lot of companies necessarily do that either. Is get back with the designer and make sure everything's right.
Right. Yeah. So everybody does it differently, no doubt about it. Yeah. So it's just a matter of getting that last rule book, and then it'll be printed. And do you think there's a chance we'll see it by the end of the year?
Yes. The reason I sound hesitant is the goal was September.
Right.
That's not going to happen now.
Right.
And it's really because of the situations we run into with the arts and graphics, which have been just very unfortunate. And but with this rate, we should get it in November, December.
Right. People can get it for Christmas.
Really move quickly. And
I think
we can when everything else happens.
So that's going to be your first game. Have you signed other people? Well, you actually you've got 2 games. You've got you've got that thing where you designed one and Morris Suckling was the developer and he designed the other half and you were the developer, right?
In fact, I'll tell you about that in just a little while.
Oh, okay,
I'll finish out with the Wharf Rats. because that's not with Wharf Rats.
Right, yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. That's somebody
Yeah,
else. Okay,
exactly.
we'll talk about that in a bit.
We wanted another designer to do our first game because we want to make this statement. Even though we're designers, we're a game company, and this is for everybody, and not just a pet project for ourselves to keep releasing something. And so we will release things too. And then we were super lucky to get not just anybody, but Herman. And anyway, so the second one is going to be a game that I designed. And the third will be one that Ryan designs. And then after that, we're talking to, now that this is going along, we're talking to a few more famous designers too that are starting to take us seriously. And I think we'll really be taken seriously when the first game delivers.
Right, when they see what it looks like, right.
And then they see we can do what we say we can do. But the second game is a Battle of the Bulge game. You might say, rightfully so, why the heck are you going to do another Battle of the Bulge game? Because there's so many. And it's a new system I've come up with called Urgent Commands.
Right. And there's timing in this.
Yes, there's actually timing in the basic way to play it. Excuse me. There's each unit is a division size, so it's not broken down smaller than that.
Right.
And so it's manageable. And it's a block game with the hidden fog, and you can do casualties real quickly by flipping it, and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
Which is just
it's kind of Columbia block size was 1, 2, 3, 4 for the step losses or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And so what it is, when the game gets going, what you're doing, you have a set of dice, and the Germans start with more action dice than the Allies because they have initiative and all this sort of thing. And you roll your dice, and it tells you what actions you get, maybe 1 or 2 moves, whatever comes up, possibility to attack, and then you have a wild side, which would be a 6, but we're going to have custom dice.
Custom dice, yeah.
And you call out what you want before you roll, like I need artillery, or whatever, and you'll put that in your assets box to be used later, whatever it is. For the Germans, what do you think they're yelling out for? Fuel, fuel, right? Because they use it up when they attack, and they don't have as many to begin with, so they're constantly needing fuel, or they're going to be stuck. And so it's not a matter of fuel comes in 2 turns, like a lot of games. Or reinforcements come on this date. Well, they're available to come on this date, but all this is up in the air because you are fast and furiously rolling your dice, not taking turns, but together.
Right.
We have a timer. It's a 2-minute timer, and that equals 2 days. So we can get through the Battle of the Bulge in like 9 turns.
And that timer, you have to make your move in those 2 minutes?
You don't make your move, you make your moves.
Right.
Yes.
Everything that you've done with those dice.
You're on your dice. I'm saying, okay, this is what I got. I got to do it, and I'm doing it. So if you took away the hands and you had a camera above it, it would look sort of like a video game or something, you know, because the things are moving. And while you're trying to figure out what you're doing, you have to also have an eye on what the other person's doing. Particularly, the Germans break through on this road, they can start taking off and things. And so that's the basic mechanic of the game, which is quite different. There's no such thing as, analysis paralysis.
Well, anybody who suffers from that this is not, it'll drive them squirrely.
It may not be for everybody.
Yeah, well.
And that's okay. It's interesting. We play tested at Origins, and unfortunately, like I said, they put not just 2 people, it's a 2-player game, but they had 2 people on a team, and it got a little more cumbersome. So the ratings for it were either really high or not very high.
Right, and
so, and I think that's because it was just too many people trying to...
too many hands.
And all this sort of thing.
I think the opposite of the analysis paralysis thing is there's another kind of gamer out there who's like, I just want to keep going. Like I can't stand sitting here waiting for this guy to right. Yeah.
If you can't see, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah.
Yes, you're exactly right. I get very, very low patience. Maybe it's getting in my old age or whatever it is, to wait for somebody to take their turn if I have nothing to do. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking this with somebody else, and that one of my biggest goals in designing a game now is involvement, immersion and involvement. And you can't immerse as well if you're not involved and you're sitting back. And so I try to make a lot of my games in some sense that both people are doing something at the same time. Now, with that, a few reasons why I call urgent commands even a little more realistic in some ways is that, say, there's Bastogne. I have an American unit heading towards it to take it, and a German unit heading towards to it. In a traditional war game, now chip pull, negates this a bit, but you can count the hexes to it, and you can say, "Oh, I'm going to make it there. I know I am." Well, you don't always know. You don't know if your units are going to move as fast as you want them to, and in the right direction, even, and all this sort of thing. So in this, you are rolling, and it takes time to roll to get those activations that you want, and the other person's doing it at the same time. So you can't assume you're going to make it somewhere first.
Well, there's also that thing of, with a bit of a time pressure, I find, like, the thing I don't generally like about solo games is the solo player kind of plays a lot the same. Whereas when you and I are playing, when I make a mistake, you're going to jump on it, and when you make a mistake, I'm going to try and jump on it, and that time pressure is going to make it more likely that I'm going to make a mistake here and there, that you're going to, but you might not even see, what.
Exactly, and there's a time crunch to capitalize on that mistake.
Right.
So it works. It keeps cascading.
Yeah, I think it's
the other thing.
It's a fresh idea to put. I mean, way back in the day, they talked about using a timer for moves and stuff, but nobody ever really did it. This is baking it right into the system.
I'm hoping. And the other thing that's bothered me is reinforcements in a typical war game. They come at this hour or whatever, and then you get to start moving them. Well, they become available on this hour, and between turns, between the 2-minute terms, you do have some things you do in between, like bring out the reinforcements, show which road they're coming in on, that sort of thing. But then you don't get them until you roll that die that says reinforcements. Then you get a group of them, and you place them on the board. Then they're there to start.
I love that.
It's not definite when they're going to actually make it.
Rachel Simmons' Gettysburg game. Each day, you get all the you're going to get Buford, you're going to get Reynolds, you're going to all, but you don't know what order they're going to. You put them out upside down along the time track, and then they come out. And that thing of not knowing, like, these guys are coming, but you don't know when, and you don't know who, and that's fantastic. It keeps the game so fresh.
Well, let me skip ahead on this game for a second, because if your listeners are like going, "Oh my God, I'll never play this game," and I can see that, but there is a more relaxed version. Okay,
right. You don't have to play with the time,
and you don't have to play with the timer,
right.
And you both roll at the same time, so you're still totally engaged for constantly. You're never not engaged, and then you see the activations, and you just say, "I'm going to play this die. This allows me to move one." And then you move one of yours. And if you have the initiative, you're playing your die first. And you may have, if you're the Germans at the beginning, it's 5 dice against 3. Then you're going to have 2 to roll at the end.
At the end, a little,
and so it still gives, a
little bonus,
edge. And so I call that a lazy or not lazy, a relaxed system. And it's an impulse system. So you're going back and forth to play your dice. And it matters what order you play those dice in. And I tell you, I want to play test that more, because there's one part of me that wants to say you roll your dice behind a screen.
Oh, and then you pull them out one at a time. You go like, this is it.
That would be a lot of fun. One thing people sometimes say, well, this is so open for cheating. Well, I don't play with cheaters. I'm not really worried about that.
We're here at a convention where Vocal Runke is showing off 3 different games, and all of them depend on the opponent looking away while you examine something.
You're exactly right.
And he's like one of the greatest designers we have.
Exactly.
And he's going like, if you want to cheat, go ahead. Like, if that's what floats your boat, it's too bad for you. But I'm like you. I just don't play with cheaters.
That's a non-issue.
Yeah, same here.
Now, you can make mistakes, but you just try not to.
That's it.
But with the impulse system, I think that's a different kind of system for a bulge game, too, in itself. If you never want to use the timer, you have still a new and unique kind of bulge
Right.
experience. And
So if the
that's what I'm trying to do is make somebody feel something different about a game. That's why I picked bulge. It's so over gamed that if my system can make you feel something different from this game, it's not about to teach. Everybody knows about the bulge. But it's if you can feel something different, experience something different, then it's worthwhile.
And that it is, that can be a teach. Like feeling something different is a teach. It's funny you should bring that up because I was talking to somebody just a couple hours ago about, some people say like, well, now that I got this game on the bulge or this game on Gettysburg, I don't need any more. I've got my bulge game. I never think of it that way. I always think of it as like, well, I like this bulge game and that one, but I want to see what Wes Crawford thinks about. Like, it's that. It's like every designer brings out something different. Exactly. There's somebody out there with a prototype that I just walked by, and it's a Gettysburg game, right? It's the same thing. There's a million Gettysburg games out there, but it's like His is actually a dice placement sort of game as well. It's not this system, but it's like
I didn't see what it was about, but I noticed it was just circles connected by lines.
Yep.
And the circles were all the prominent places.
Yep. You see Culp's Hill and exactly. All that stuff.
So it's just cutting to the chase. Let's go to the location that they have.
And I think he's going to be using custom dice as well, but in a totally different way. So
interesting.
And it's like, okay, I want to see that's Sam London. I want to see what Sam London's going to do with Gettysburg. It's like,
was that Sam London?
Yeah.
Cool. I want to meet him.
I'll introduce you if I get to. He's a good guy.
Listen to his interviews. He's so personable and got so many great ideas.
And a really nice guy. Yeah, you'll like him.
Good.
Well, so let's skip ahead and tell me about this back and forth thing you've going with Morris Suckling, because he's a fantastic designer.
He is, and sort of like in the music business, you always got to sometimes reach for the star, and unashamedly just go for it. I had sad part. I had two parents with dementia, and there was back to back. I was driving a whole lot, 4 hours to Roanoke, Virginia, from the Maryland area, to help with any way I could. And so I'd be listening in the car, not to music, but to YouTube videos.
I do the same.
And history videos and all this. So I was listening so much. And something came up about the coup incident, the coup attempt in Japan on the last day of World War II to stop the surrender.
Yeah.
So this sounds interesting. I remember reading a little something about it, but it was almost like a footnote in the books, And so I listened to this whole thing, and it mapped out the story hour by hour as to what happened. And I just found it fascinating and found other YouTube videos on it. And then book, Japan's Longest Day, is a great resource on this, and it told even more fuller story. And I said, this ought to be game. So I started doing it like I usually do, is just started thinking through and had it all in my mind, but hadn't even put it down on paper yet. And so Maurice and I were at Circle DC, Kevin Bertram's conference, which is very similar in style.
Totally want to get there, but it's a long way from Calgary.
I know. Well, once you're on a plane,
it's true.
You're going to land. And so anyway, I remember it was, I think, one of the last nights, and we were just both wandering around D.C. Down in that area, and ran into him and said, let's go eat dinner together. So we went and ate dinner. And I said, there's an idea I've had. I just want to see what you think of it. And if you really like it, I'd love to work with you on it, And I told him about that. And I didn't hear anything from him for 4 months. And then out of the blue, this is my perspective, Maurice, if you're hearing this. Then he wrote back and said, I've been thinking about that. It's such a great story about, if you read the book or whatever, you'll see what more to the story. And he's very first and foremost a storyteller, in his games and everything. And so we said, okay, great. How do you want to go about cooperating? I've already got the coup part all planned in my head because I've been driving back and forth, and I got it all in my head how it would work. And he said, what interests me is the week leading up to that, and the War Council and all the debating and the issues they considered. and all the things that happened with the atomic bombs dropping and the Soviets invading Manchuria and all that. That's what interests me. And so I said, okay, well, let's do two sides of a board. I'll do the coup, the last 12 hours, and you do the week coming up to it. And he did this fantastic job on really a game that can be played in about 45 minutes. And it's called The Emperor's Choice. Because eventually, with the War Council meeting, they couldn't decide. They had to bring in the emperor to make the choice of whether to surrender. And that's one game. Then it's a second independent game, The Emperor's Voice. And mine is the emperor has already made the recordings for the surrender to be played at noon the next day. And why did they wait to noon is because they had to play it during a time where all the Japanese in the various time zones would hear it. Okay? So they had to wait till noon. They thought that was the best time. And these officers who started grumbling, started coalescing into a plan, a way, what they needed to do, confront the emperor, stop the recordings, find them and destroy them, all this sort of thing. And so all this goes on in the game.
Right.
And he's turning this emperor's voice, and the reason voice too, and Maurice thought up voice, the emperor's voice.
Right. Well, it's great with choice and voice. I mean, yeah great.
Well, it was interesting. I'll tell you about that in a second. The emperor's voice, the Japanese people had never heard his voice. So we're used to hearing the president's voice,
right.
all the time for a long time, but they had not heard it. So that was the other hugely significant thing, to hear their own emperor in his voice surrendering. That was like, hugely significant, right? And so one side is called, and Maurice came up with these names. What do you call these two sides? It's like, I don't know, we sort of think of them as good and bad at that point, as far as what they're trying to do. So if you're surrendering, you're good, right? But we call it honor for the side that does not want to surrender, and peace for the side that's that. So in both of our games, they are honor and peace. You can put the two games together. Originally, we thought, it'd be one game, you flip over the board, you have enough pieces for everything. Worthing said, no, there's got to be two different games. There's two different experiences and stuff. But it's our job to convince everybody, if you have one game, you need the other. Story. And if you hook them together, you play his game for about 45 minutes, and the end of that affects the beginning of voice.
Great.
And then my game, if you know how to play it, it's about 75 minutes. So both games can be played in about 2 hours.
Right.
And we have a little mechanic that he came up with at the end. When you do things to score points, you get cubes in your own color, red versus white for honor versus peace. And you take these cubes, and at the end of his game, you take all the cubes and put them into this dice tower contraption, which Worthington says they're going to make a punchboard version of it, and only certain cubes fall to the bottom.
So
you see who won.
Oh, so you want more of your
cubes,
colors in that.
But it's not a guarantee that you win.
Right.
So no matter how badly the game's going, you do have hope to the end.
Right.
But still, statistically, you're probably going to lose if you're behind by much. And then the net of those cubes, like if you beat me 3 cubes to 1, you'd take 2 cubes to the next game.
Right. And you'd start with a little leg up.
A different way. And the Emperor's Voice is a very kinetic game where you're moving the pieces around and you don't know who is really siding with who as far as the big generals and other officers, and you're trying to persuade them and all this sort of thing. So it's a little like, I was inspired by, it was a Milton Bradley game, Conspiracy. Do you ever know that?
No,
game?
I didn't know. I've never played it.
They had these busts of these different agents, these plastic busts that you snap together.
Right.
And they're carrying a briefcase around. You need to get it to your city. But ahead of time, you've written down how much money out of a common pool of money, but each had the same amount. You allocate it towards that agent. And so if they try to move that agent in their direction, you say, no, I challenge that. And one of you, I can't remember which, says, okay, no, I got 15,000 on this guy. And I've said, well, I've got 16. And if they can either say, well, I got more, just trying to
bluff you.
If they say they got more, they have to be honest,
right.
And they keep moving it unless I say I've got more. You might not want to say, how much you have towards that agent in real, because then they might, do something to counter that, or they know who
They'll get more information.
Yeah, so you get more information. So I've always liked that. It was amazing. And then I saw Kremlin, and it's the same thing in a way, the game Kremlin.
Yep.
And which has been around forever, 70s or something?
Yep.
But you allocate all these resource points, whatever it is, the money or whatever, their loyalty, ahead of the time at the game. Well, I wanted to take that kind of system and that intrigue and stuff, and this loyalty tests and stuff like that, into my game, but I didn't want it all set in stone before the beginning of the game. So you're putting the resource is the chit with different numbers on it. You're putting them some face down, some face up on these different characters throughout the game, and somebody will do a forced commit action and then it's determined on who they really.
And all these characters are trying to influence the emperor to.
No, they're influencing other.
Oh
generals.
no! Whether they're going to do the coup or not. Yes, right, of course, because nobody really influences the emperor.
Two characters, Shiozaki and Hatanaka, are the coup characters, and they can never be persuaded out of it.
Right.
On the peace side, there is the emperor and the prime minister, and they can never be talked out of peace.
Right.
But then it just worked out this way. It really is like this. There are three major characters on each side, which are biased one way or another, and so they'll have one chip
They can swing a bit.
How strong they are. That side, and so
Right.
it goes back like that. So there's that going on. There's also a game within a game that there's a cutaway of the inside of the imperial household. And they hid the recordings in there, and so you're trying to continue to hide them, and they're trying to
find them. Yeah, right.
So there's a bunch of things like that going on. So I've been real happy with that. At Origins, they gave ratings 1 to 6, 6 being best, and it came out an average of 5.5.
Oh, fantastic!
So that's what's got me sort of excited for this game. Right
Well,
now.
and it
Coming up with Worthington. Worthington's doing it.
and Morris has got a few games with Worthington, and he's so great at distilling things down. It's like his games are not overwrought with all kinds of chrome and this and that. He boils it down. I'm going to play his Crisis 1914 tomorrow. It's just like, the first two people you've linked up with here in your new profession. He's great.
No, believe me, I count my blessings. This is like, in so many ways, a dream come true, because I remember being a kid in Blacksburg, Virginia, where Virginia Tech is, if you're not familiar with it, southwestern part of Virginia, and thinking, oh my God, if only my games could be out there or something, And then I've spent all my life in entertainment, and there's been, some nice things have happened, some horrible things have. It's like anybody's life in their business, their profession. But it's always in the back of my mind, what would really be a success would be to even have one game that's actually published. And now at my old age of 69, they're coming. There's some games coming out, so that's pretty cool.
I talk to a lot of folks, doing what I do, and a lot of people have a similar story to yours, where they were so involved in the hobby, and then career or marriage or both or whatever took them out of it for anywhere from 20 to 40 years, and then they had some more time on their hands as they got a little older and went, there's this thing I used to love, and it gets rekindled. And for some of them, like you, it's design, not just playing.
Yes. In fact, I design way more than I play. I ought to play more. But, and you just struck something by saying that. And that's that, people comment that they're worried about the hobby dying because people are older and all this kind of thing, and then they die out. And I always saying, well, how can we grow, the hobby? How can we get more people into it? Well, that phenomenon you just described of people going away from it and coming back, that's what can also keep it going. Because a lot of people at various ages were younger and were into these kinds of historical games and complex games, and then come back. It's not just us from that played it that played it in the 60s and 70s. It's even people that older, and they just got to come back, and we got to recapture them and bring them in.
They've been saying the hobby's dying since the late 80s, early 90s. You know, it's like I think my whole lifetime they've said the novel is dying, and you know, I just bought another one last week. So,
Exactly.
yeah, and there's going to be young people get into it, and actually, you know, there's more games being printed today than ever in our lifetimes.
Exactly.
So all this fear, you know, it's misplaced, because there's if you're an old-time Hex and Counter wargamer, there's plenty of those being made. If you're somebody who wants like something new and different, there's a ton of those. And the people making new don't push out the people making the old style, and neither the other way. It's like there's just more of everything. There's nothing to be afraid of. We live in a time of riches in terms of game design.
There's something like 5,000 games published a year, I read.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
That's of all sorts. You know.
When we were kids, I'm in my 60s as well. It felt like, you know, you didn't buy every game that came out, every war game that came out. But partly because you weren't interested in every one, but like financially, and I'm just a middle class kid, I could afford to buy every Avalon Hill game that came out in a year.
So, yeah, they only brought one or two out.
Oh yeah, and S&T had 6. You know, it's like I say, I could get all those now. That comes out in 2 weeks. You know, like so.
Exactly.
You know, doing what I do with trying to cover games, I can't cover all the games. It's just like impossible now.
We are in such a good state.
Yeah.
And what's amazing too, I mean, different companies take a different approach to it, and you know, whatever, to the games and the kinds of games they sell, and even, you know, the designers and things. But when I look at my shelves now, because I went from somewhere like 20 games in 2018, and I'm now over 600.
I hear you.
My wife won't listen to this. But anyway, I can look at one company, because I have them by companies.
Yeah, me too.
I say, oh my gosh, if every one of my games went away, except this one company's games, you still have a lifetime of play.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
They're doing so many great games.
It doesn't have to be GMT or the biggest, you know, like a mid-range company. Like if I had all of Revolution's games, for example, I'd just be so happy. I'd be like, I could just play that stuff forever.
Randy with Legion over there.
Yeah.
Got great titles.
Oh, totally.
And stuff, you know.
He's got Kim Kanger in his stable of designers. I love Kim Kanger's games. They're great.
So many. So it's really neat. It's very. We're in an awesome time, and yeah, it's hard to keep up. And so at some point, I think we all are going to have to say, well, we don't have to keep up, you know.
I've got to, you know, what changed it all for me, and it's going to sound so funny, but I had a flood in my house, and it affected. I ended up having to remodel the basement, and so instead of I just had all these IKEA shelves that I could just keep adding on to. When I remodeled the basement, I put in one wall of built-in shelves, and I've limited myself by space. And it's when those are full, and they're close-ish, it's going to be like one in means one out at a certain point.
Can you do that? Yeah, that kind of discipline.
Well, yeah, you know, you say your wife's not listening, and my wife's not listening, but she comes down to the basement and goes, you know, honey, like those shelves are full. What are you going to do?
You know what you need to tell your wife next time? You need to tell her. I was talking with Wes, and his whole basement is full of drums, and he has 30 drum students each week. And then his games are upstairs. You know, should we do something like that?
Yeah, maybe I could move him upstairs. Well, actually, you know, my wife's quite good about it all, and it was her idea to turn the whole, when we remodeled the basement, to turn that into like my studio for recording and video and all that. So, you know, honey, if you were listening, I'm totally totally grateful.
Well, mine puts up with a lot.
Yeah. If when we get to our age, if our gals are still with us, they like us the way we are, and there's a certain amount of.
Or at least put up with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of give and take both ways. Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you: is Ryan designing as well? Has he got something coming down the pike with Wharf Rat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, definitely. One interesting development is he has Brave Little Belgium.
Yes,
He's designer with that.
Yeah.
And some of the things that came out with Hollandspiel, he's got rights to them.
Right.
So one thing we're thinking of, when it's probably not if, but when do we want to release deluxe versions of those?
Right. Yeah.
Because we are going to have all of our games are going to be somewhat deluxe in a few different fashions. And the other is he's been dabbling in some designs of some whole new things too. And remember, our Wharf Rats, we're not just calling ourselves a war game company. We're a conflict and game company, and the conflicts can be historical, psychological, economic, science fiction, fantasy. They can be anything, and that's where our end goal is to be. Even though the first ones, because we have most of our contacts and stuff with media people and with gamers and everything, will probably be more historical, and stuff. But he's got a few different ideas. We all have a few different ideas, and in the meanwhile, when I come out with games, if we're not going to do it, then I'll still pitch it to other companies. He will too. He's got a great game with Herman Lutman that they've co-designed called More Brains.
Right.
And that's coming out with Legion's sister company, going to be called Jackal.
Yeah, that's brand new for Legion. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's got a really good logo over there too.
I just we've talked online, Randy and I, and then just today I met him in the flesh for the first time, so that was nice. Yeah.
I met him. Really
nice fellow. Yeah.
Anyway, so that should be coming out as Jacko Games' second game, I think. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but that's what it sounded like. And that's how Herman likes to do zombie games.
Yeah.
Even if you don't call them zombies, they're sort of zombies.
Yeah. His Plum Island games and all that stuff.
This is turning everything on its head. You're the zombies trying to get to the city center of the humans.
Oh, nice.
So,
fantastic.
Really cool. I can't wait to get a copy.
Oh, great.
But
this has been great. Great talking to you, Wes. And unless there's anything else, I just want to wish you the best. And
thank you.
I'm excited to when that first one comes. I can't wait to see how it all turns out.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we just got word with the Emperor's Choice and Emperor's Voice that they're now shooting for a Kickstarter in the fourth quarter of this year.
Great. So so
that's coming up.
That'll kickstart in the fourth quarter, and maybe get it delivered like maybe 6 months after that, or whatever it takes.
Whatever Worthington's done.
Yeah,
they seem to.
Their Kickstarters are faster than a lot of people's.
Yes.
They'll put a Kickstarter out, and they'll say you've got 10 days to pledge, and then we're going.
Yeah, and then they
deliver. Because there's a lot of Kickstarters that are.
These companies is the art. That's where it is.
Yeah.
Designer, they play tested, usually a lot of that, but then to get all the art done and then get it over to China, and then they have their schedule, which is out of our control too. So,
but if all goes like knock on wood, if all goes well, we're going to see not the Worthington, but we're going to see your first Wharf Rat game before Christmas.
By the end of the year.
Yeah. So everybody look out for that. And thanks again, and have a great convention.
Oh, thank you. You too. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Wes's day job is musician, and speaking with him had the relaxed vibe you get with musicians of a certain age who've been through it. Great guy. If you get a chance to meet him at a convention, have him show you a game or two. You won't regret it. Parting shots. Well, I have no real parting shots today. I've already complained about the gamer's setup instructions, so that's probably enough of a rant for one day. So thanks for listening. Podcasting, of course, is very different from YouTube, where there's an easy comment section to interact with after watching. I'd love to hear from you. There's pushingcardboard.com, where you can comment on any episode or fill in the survey. There's the Discord server, where there's usually someone talking about games, or just email me, Grant at pushingcardboard.com. Let's talk some more games. Thanks again to all the Pushing Cardboard supporters, whether it's by becoming a Ko-Fi patron or buying swag. If you want to become a supporter, there's links on the website, in the newsletter, and also, of course, affiliate links for Cube for Me and Noble Knight Games. Okay, 3 more interviews to go, so hopefully you'll hear from me again in under a month. In the meantime, have fun. Really, that's what it's all about.